welcome again to the Intuitive Senses Survival Sessions, January 6, 2024. This is Val and Kevin next to me, and Sola, she's joined us too, over there in the next table. We're in La Mission, Baja California, and we're presenting information on intuition today for those who are interested in learning how to become more aware. And I'm going to start with something Dwayne the Great Writer wrote about intuition. And what he says here is, with the focused learning on the intuitive senses, anyone can begin to see that all the contrived systems as they have come to be in this new nowness are actually all about controlling others by them. This is a real hint to unaware people to really wake up now, and there will always be those who still want to pretend that this earth can get better and that there are authorities in the upper atmospheres somewhere that will take care of this. It really does make sense to have a better planet, and that will take a lot of focusing and doing from many who are more aware than most. As the created systems and created consciousness exists now, everything that is being created soon becomes self-imploding, as is the black holes with this physical realm. There is no la-la land on this floating rock in black space. That's from Dwayne the Great Writer. And this is not on a negative tone, it's just describing and presenting what's going on here. We're not negating anything that's going on, it's just it could get a lot better through the agreement that people would if they woke up through their agreement. It could be a better place to live. It could be a la-la land, you could say, but it needs agreement from people, because we are the ones who are creating this situation. So intuition is a big part of this, and it's again part of the 5 bodies that we each have: the physical, the astral, the causal, the mental, and then the intuitive body, which is the last subtle body nearest to our real awareness, who we really are. We're really just a viewpoint somewhere. We're trying to recognize where we are, who we are, what we want to do. So this intuitive part of ourselves is closer to who we really are, and that's where we're focusing on it. And I would say that everybody knows about this intuitive part of themselves. It's just they don't pay attention to it a lot. They're more indoctrinated into using the literal part of themselves. Books, authorities, sacred journals, etc., what people tell them, instead of listening to what life shows them through their intuition, which again is closest to their real awareness, and that will guide you if you start listening and paying attention to it. So we'll get into this a little bit later, how to do that. But right now I want to give it over to Kevin and let him share something of the process here of waking up.
Okay, yes, and so creation, which we all are operating in, is like a large multi-dimensional computer game, and the same principles apply. That just as in with computer games, everything that occurs within them is based on files or programming that allow it to be, and as I said, the same principles of computer games apply to the multi-dimensional simulators that awareness operates through. And but as the analogy goes, when it comes to computer games, as the example I'm using here, the data would be installed in the computer, and then it would be rendered on the screen, and then the computer operator would symbolically be the real awareness, or that which we actually are, animating through all the mechanics to have the experience as being displayed. And so this creational realm, and indeed all simulators, as there are, well, unlimited simulators, I imagine, that are feasible training schools, if you like, by which awareness can operate and animate body forms within, in order to recognise the is as a part of, which is the real purpose and the function that the simulators serve. And so what happens then is that we have this isness, everything reality, which we all are, and parts of it which we reference as real awareness, U-tunes or units. They effectively select a particular simulator, and then they take on the ideas that affect it, and this becomes then formulated as the consciousness, and the consciousness would be the equivalent of the computer, which is retaining all the data of the computer game we are playing. The consciousness then affects a body form by which the data that the simulator comprises of can be rendered into visual simulation we then can experience. And so our body forms, the body form mechanics and the sensory apparatus would be the equivalent of our computer screen where we're playing our computer games, and where we can have the experiences. And so what tends to happen is, as I said, we will go through creation then. We will have taken on the template or the idea of a particular simulator. That will then be our overall stadium or arena or overall computer game in which we are operating within, including all the other individuals that are also in the same simulator that we are operating within. And then in addition to that, we will then start to create and generate our own ideas, and so operating within the same simulator arena that all the others present will also be within. So individuals then will have the ability to then generate their own games within the overall game, as it were, because we have these various body vehicles, and these vehicles are the mechanics by which we generate these ideas, the thoughts and the emotions. And these are the ideas then affect their corresponding simulation that we then experience. And so based on that idea, so it becomes rather apparent that we each are the deciders of everything we experience, because we have the body form mechanics, and indeed nothing can we experience other than that which we decide. And so when it comes then to adverse situations that we experience, the question may be raised, why would we want to create that for ourselves? But generally, but as everything is based on cause and effect principles, as everything is based on agreement, as we create these ideas through the body vehicles, as these ideas become installed in consciousness, then affect their corresponding simulation, that which we experience is then which we create ourselves, or as an alternative, they can be the ideas as created by others that we have agreed with. And so what tends to happen is, as most people are one-dimensionally focused, as their focus is predominantly on the physical and the astral parts of themselves, as opposed to being multi-dimensional, they are oblivious of the extra ideas or files they are actually taking on. Because when an individual creates something, if one is only locked into the one-dimensional or physical astral aspects of themselves, they can only see the surface one-dimensional front of it. They will only see that as it is presented on the physical level. But what tends to happen is, a lot of these idea creations will have other ideas in association with them, ideas that we won't see. and although we are oblivious of them, we are still taking them on. And an example of that will be that if an individual has an intentionality or an inclination to want to control and dominate another individual, this will actually be an idea that they have created and will be formulated in their consciousness. And now when that individual then creates another idea that presents as it will on the simulated surface one-dimensional physical front, it may have surface appeal in that it may seem to be of some benefit, but as it will be connected with other ideas and intentionalities of control and the desire to subjugate, so these additional ideas are being taken on and consciousness installed also. And so if we have an individual who is a ruthless tyrant, and they have a desire to want to control others, and their consciousness is designed in that way, then as they present their surface ideas, as we agree with those, we also are taking on these additional ideas and including a consciousness that is designed that is designed to want to be tyrannical. And so we actually are deciding inadvertently to experience being controlled by that individual through a virtue of agreeing to a surface idea which is interconnected with another idea, intentionality of control that we don't see. And this would be one of the benefits of becoming more multi-dimensional, to open up to the greater magnitude of our multi-dimensional selves, the intuitive facility, for example, because then we are going to be apprised of all the ideas that we are taking on, in addition to those which are on the surface only, the unseen other dimensional ideas that we don't see. Because on the real side, as we refer to it as, when we go to sleep and our awareness vacates the physical level body, we are then able to access potentially the full multi-dimensionality of ourselves, and our awareness can operate through any of the body vehicles, from the astral vehicle to the mental to the ethereal, by which therefore everything throughout creation can potentially be revealed to us, and we can see all the ideas that are in association with the surface front, the ideas that we don't see, and so therefore we can be apprised of the more dastardly ideas that ideally we would then seek to avoid, because it is through our intuitive self that we can then have the oversight of everything that's happening and transpiring in creation, because the intuitive self is the closest part of the creational self to the real awareness, that which we actually are. And this is part of this everything reality that animates through all consciousness. It'll animate through the entirety of the program, which affects the entirety of the simulator, and including all the other body forms and consciousnesses that are a part of it. And so we can determine every idea that's transpiring, and on the real side then we can be shown all that we need to know in order to afford warnings and heads-ups of the various potentiality of ideas that may at some point impact through to the physical level. Because in reality, every idea, every agreement is its instant effect, and this will therefore be revealed on the real side, but through the design of consciousness. So as it affects onto the physical level, there is a delay factor where even though the ideas, the agreements, and the intents are instantly their effects in actuality, they will take a certain amount of processing time frames to become apparent on the physical level, because there is the inclusion of time and space ideas in the consciousness as it affects onto the physical level, which affects as this delay factor. And I always give the analogy, it's the equivalent of a movie, where if an idea or an agreement sets a movie in motion, the effect culmination will be the movie's end. The movie will be complete in its entirety on the disc, but through the creational, but through the but through the consciousness affected physical body mechanics. So the individual must process through the idea from cause to effect outcome, a little just like the DVD players play the movie from start to finish, but in reality the movie is complete and can be seen on the real side, and so we can see the effects that, although are present now in actuality, they won't become physical level manifest until this delay factor is processed through, and so we have the opportunity to indeed make alterations to the decisions and the choices we are making, that we can have alternative outcomes that are perhaps more conducive to life and awareness. And because in regards to the human race, as an example, I mean, they were a species that were genetically created and mishmashed together by the reptilians that came to this planet initially, and from day one then the human race has actually been enslaved, and this is an agreement that has been put in place from the human race's inception and has been maintained ever since. And as an agreement is maintained, so it will continuously affect circumstances reflecting that. And the ability of a controlling species to maintain control of the species that they enslave is of course greatly dependent on the slave species not becoming aware of what's taking place. And so on the surface one-dimensional front it will look a certain way. Dwayne always refers to it as the business world, and where what is put in place, the social structures and so forth, and the institutions will seem as though affording benefit, but as I said, behind the surface front will be the intentionality to control, and all that has been created, particularly if it's by the hands of individuals, beings or species who have a particular consciousness that is more inclined to want to dominate, then what the enslaved species are actually agreeing with will be basically a program where they are consistently and continuously controlled, and that will be that therefore will be their experience. And so once again, as we access our intuitive self, we can be shown on the real side the actuality of what's taking place in regards to not only the human species but other species throughout multi-dimensional creation. We can actually be shown the intentions of these characters, and we can be shown the reality of the institutions and the social structures they have set up and what lays behind them. And a good analogy is looking behind the wizard's curtain, as they say, where that you can see the actuality of what's taking place beyond what is being presented on the surface. And because the idea of creation, as I said, is for a mechanism by which the isness true of reality of ourselves can be recognised by the comparison that it affords, but also part of the process does involve a facing of the consciousness that we have constructed, all the agreements we have accumulated throughout our lifetimes, that as we progressively release them, we no longer are attached to their effects. And as we release the entirety of the consciousness, as we let go of the program, we no longer are necessarily then resigned and restricted to the cause and effect creations. And part of this will also be the removing and releasing of agreements as they pertain to other individuals and indeed species the species that are inclined to enslave others. So as a human being, as you go about this process, you will be releasing and redacting and withdrawing agreement from the controlling dark force reptilians which are subjugating the species and humanity, and so therefore you will extricate yourselves from further projected future lifetimes in which you will find yourselves in similar and very likely worse circumstances as the controllers continue to ramp up and escalate their controlling agendas. And this model of a slave and controller dynamic plays out multi-dimensionally in all its various forms, because this overall creational realm is under the control of what we broadly term as the dark forces or the unaware, and which generally takes on a reptilian form in various expressions, and which operates through all life levels, and indeed which these life levels are lorded over by self-proclaimed gods, which also take a reptilian form. And again, what makes a being a god, or makes a being in a very creationally powerful position, is simply the agreements they have managed to trawl, which affect them as being able to operate in those positions. And so, as I said, this model of enslavement is predominant throughout multi-dimensional creation and plays out in various ways. And I have a number of real-side experiences, and the guides have shown over the years to me, that reveals this model that is played out, the controller and slave dynamic. And there was an experience I shared relatively recently, for example, where there were a species of humanoids. They looked relatively similar to the human body form, except they had slit pupilled eyes, almost like cat eyes, and they had a certain almost utopian planet somewhere in multi-dimensional creation. And although they weren't as controlled and restricted and bombarded with poisoning and lethal frequencies as the human race were, they still were in a controlled situation, because what tends to happen is, as the Dark Force controllers maintain their grip on the simulator and practically all species within it, the extent of their control that is directly proportional by the degree by which their slave species are aware of the control they are in. And so as the slave species begin to rattle their chains, so is it necessary for the controllers to ramp up their controlling measures. And we see that with the human species, the human race, whereby it's necessary to bombard them with distorted electromagnetism, Wi-Fi, the harmful and poisoning toxins and the vaccinations and the various subliminal controlling mechanisms and so on and so forth. And but with this species, as I said, the cat-eyed humanoids, they actually they were rather content with their situation. They were completely oblivious of the fact they were actually controlled, and so the reptilian expression that was controlling them in that situation was content simply to observe them, because as the reptilians had already their agreements trawled, therefore these agreements were able to prop up and maintain the reptilians' dominion over the simulator, and so the reptilians are quite happy, are quite content with that. But obviously when a species does start to become aware of them, so is it necessary to bring in further measures to ensure they remain controlled and remain as extending agreement. And so, as I said, these reptilians, or the expressions of them in this case, in regards to these cat-eyed humanoids, they would operate in various space stations around their planet, simply monitoring. But they had actually encased the planet in a dome, completely encasing it in an impenetrable field. But the species, the cat-eyed people, the humanoids, were unaware of this, because they developed technology up to a point, but only as was necessary for their survival, and so they weren't a space-faring species, and they didn't even have any consideration or any inclination to want to explore space, and so they were oblivious of the presence of this dome. But there were a number of them who were more curious than the rest, I would say, and they came to the conclusion that they had the idea that their species were actually being controlled, even though it wasn't at all apparent to the species as a whole. And they constructed a craft, and they actually would then elevate it to a position where they encountered this dome, and they breached it, and then as they were obviously being monitored by the reptilians around the planet as they went about this, they were beamed aboard their ship, or one of their ships or their stations, and what was confirmed then was, as they had confirmation that yes, indeed, they were being controlled by these reptilians, and obviously this particular group that was beamed aboard would probably never live to see another day. They obviously wouldn't be allowed to be returned to the planet and then spread amongst their fellow humanoids what they had discovered. But nevertheless, in that experience, I was shown that these reptilians then would then consider their next the possibility of having to ramp up their control measures, because it was a case that even though it was only a small handful of these humanoids that had discovered the reality of the control system they actually were in, that their planet was encased in an impenetrable dome or globe or energy field, it's very possible that others of the enslaved species may follow in their footsteps, and so the reptilians were now pondering the possibilities of ramping up and escalating their control, and very likely it would follow along similar lines to that which the human race has experienced. And so this was just one example of an experience I was shown, which reveals how this control and slave dynamic plays out multi-dimensionally, and generally the controllers take the form of reptilians or body forms in association, such as the Greys and other more malicious and mal-intended orientated body forms. And Paula Twitchell did describe this as a warring universe, and indeed is a creation that, as the simulator is rather old, literally speaking, in that it has progressed a lot. It has progressed quite far from its original inception, I suppose, because now we are currently in the final, what they call the final epoch, the Iron Age, where the consciousness has become so distorted and convoluted with idea agreements that as the consciousness affects the simulator is now in an equally distorted state of affairs, and this expresses more so as the presence of more malintended body forms and species in positions where they have the agreements extended to them, where they can dominate and control practically every other species in the simulator that are not part of their controlling systems and structures. And so, as I said, as the individual accesses their intuitive self and becomes more so multi-dimensional, they will have revealed everything that is going on in this creational realm or simulator, including that which is transpiring with their own species. And then they'll be undergoing a process where they release all these agreements, so they no longer are resigned to the effects themselves, which then will put them in a position where they potentially no longer have to be resigned to the creational simulators, and extrication from them is possible. And the mechanism by which we connect with the real awareness and this process begins to unfold is the New You song, which goes thusly: You, and this will set the individual on a process of, as I said, of a process of awareness, which will be the releasing of all agreements of the consciousness, and ultimately the recognition of the real awareness. And the real awareness then will be able to recognise the isness it is a part of through everything creational as a comparative tool. And so I'll just stop there momentarily, I think.
Thank you, Kevin. As Kevin mentioned, the new you is the key to accessing the intuition. It's not the only thing, but it's a key factor if you want to keep it simple. And you can use this before bed. We'll do it again before we end here, but you can sing it before bed for 5-10 minutes or however long you feel, or you can do it during the day, during your daily activities. But it is the connection to the real universes, as we call them, the real awareness, outside the matrix, outside the simulator. It's a connection that if you listen to your intuition, it will guide you. It's actually life is guiding you. But this is the key component to, at this point in history, in the planet, it's the the so-called mantra or whatever you want to call it to use. It replaces Om, Amen, and all the other mantras that were effective in the past but no longer lead you to the place where it's beneficial for you. So we'll do it again as we leave here, and thank you for joining us today at the mission here, and we'll see you next week. So it goes like this. New you.
What has become known as dreams is actually your intuitive senses that provide new openings to far more than what can be experienced on Earth. Over the course of time, which has been many lifetimes, the world controllers have constantly changed history according to what they have decided for them. And this is why most unaware people are very confused as to why they are here now. The present-day education systems created by them are the result of tricking unaware people into a gradual transformation from the all-natural intuitive senses into convinced academic and literalized specimens, where they become the subjects to continuously and for more ongoing lifetimes work the contrived business world for capitalized controllers. Do the birds do this and also destroy what is all natural for themselves? You can contact Val Vitols at 408-990-6627 or email at valvitols4@yahoo.com. Thank you.